Hey, it's been a long time. I don't want to put the following out there with at least coming on camera to say hello because I thought it would be a little warmer and more personal. I've been waiting a long time to say this. I was waiting for the time to be right, and all of a sudden the time is right. So, here goes. I've contemplated sharing my experience for some time now. I've decided to speak because I think I have a perspective that will add something positive to the conversation as it's evolving. I'm speaking also because I know what it is to stand in support of Corey Goode and his crew, and I also know what it means to become aware of and then recognize those stories as false. What it feels like to know that you've been bamboozled. I also speak because I'm just weary of name calling, all that name calling being thrown around by almost every engaged party at the perceived villain. And I speak now because the time is right. My intention is to inject a harmonic frequency into our field so that those who are paying attention can do likewise. A little history. One thing that will give context to my story is the fact that I've been a truth seeker for about as long as I can remember. My version of the truth, as far as I was concerned, arose out of my own direct experiences, fueled by reading sacred texts and applying various described methods as personal practice. I've read as many spiritual texts as I could access since age 14. Yes, many of you would have labeled me as a New Ager, but the irony is that I was intuitively suspicious of that term. As far as I'm concerned, Blavatsky's contribution was phenomenally huge. She didn't bring in any new information. What she did was to introduce Western society to the ages-old Eastern spiritual philosophies, mostly Hindu. My own path has evolved out of exposing myself to everything I could, basically from Western Hermeticism, Buddhist traditions, indigenous shamanism, what I call the earth path, Hinduism, magical traditions, anything that was mystical. I am a mystic by nature. You name it, I was hungry for a system that would again put me in touch with what most refer to as the Holy Spirit. It was present when I was a child, and I can report that my later search ended successfully. Thank you very much. In 2010, I started watching Ancient Aliens. I enjoyed it very much, but I didn't want anyone to know for fear they would label me as a fluffy, foo-foo person. Yes, I'm guilty of such judgments around this. I was never interested in ufology. Being a child of the 50s and of the family I grew up in, the words UFO and abducted made me think of standing in line at the grocery, seeing the sensationalist headlines on the magazine rack screaming out from the National Enquirer. It was all just so sordid to me. So along comes Ancient Aliens, and I started having memories surface, like a recurring dream from childhood, or was it a dream? Of a Captain Hook-style ship hovering outside my bedroom window at night. A miniature version about the size of a small craft. Or that summer night back in the 60s, I was with my family as my dad drove us back home from eating out. We were on a dark, rural road. This was in the Dunes National Seashore area around southern Michigan and northern Indiana. He'd stopped and parked on the side of the road so we could get a better look at these lights in the sky zooming around at these crazy fast speeds. I recall my parents' exclamations of, "Look, Eddie, what the hell?" And then the memory just stops. We never talked about it. Or that time in the mid-90s when I was in an occult bookshop and Return of the Bird Tribes by Ken Carey literally fell on my foot. I read that, and it kindled what felt like a recognition of a very fundamental part of my soul. There were many, many synchronicities occurring in succession as a result of initially tuning into ancient aliens, not the least of which have been several contact experiences that are intermittently ongoing up to the present time. I'll stop there because I feel I've given you enough of my backstory to understand that I had no reason to doubt Corey Goode's information when I first became aware of him in 2015. August, to be exact. I was already subscribed to Gaia TV, or Gaiam, as it was then called. I had started noticing David Wilcock in 2010, and I was alternately amused by and in admiration of his intelligence. I started watching Cosmic Disclosure when it debuted, and I was struck by how flat Corey Goode's presentation was, but I justified that by chalking it up to the nervousness someone would feel who has no on-camera experience. Right around then, I was contacted by a couple I'd come into contact with as a result of my association with a person that I'd been working with. In April of 2016, I began working with a husband and wife team. I began collaborating with them, and they also asked me to help revamp their website. Now, I had a great time with these two. They were members of the Project Avalon Forum, and they introduced me to their friend Bill Ryan, the owner and creator of Project Avalon, and I became a member. So a little side note is that I interviewed Simon Parks in the spring of 2015 for my podcast, and I'd had a bad experience. So I was encouraged by the couple and then Bill Ryan to share this in the forum, which I did in 2016. And it was then that I really noticed for the first time this backbiting and acrimonious accusations, and they were flying around on this thread like digital daggers. It disturbed me. I'm a tender child. I have to tell you, I really am. I was also exploring other researchers and creators like Daniel List or DJ and his channel Dark Journalist, Richard Dolan, and the one and only Dr. Joseph Farrell. Like everyone in the so-called truth community, I was getting info that was making my head spin. I may have been spiritually knowledgeable, but, well, if you're listening to this, you appreciate words and phrases like astonishment, yearning for justice, deeply and darkly disturbing, etc., etc. Well, when 2017 rolled around, my daughter became chronically ill, and my 19-year-old canine soulmate was obviously approaching his passing. Family life was intense, and the couple I was working with offered me comfort in their emotional support and the hard work the three of us were doing together. I continued watching Cosmic Disclosure, blissfully unaware of any of the questions that were being raised. I mentioned Corey Goode's name to the couple, and that's when my relationship with them took a turn. She became vehement and used some really strong language to describe her attitude regarding Corey Goode. I wasn't really able to figure out where she was coming from because she got so angry. The angrier she got, the less articulate she became. All she said was that I was able to make out he had pulled the wool over people's eyes on the forum and that he was pure evil. Now, to be fair, she said I should go and look at the forum, but, you know, what was going on with my home life, I didn't have time with everything that I was doing. So I also tuned out because she was getting so emotional and angry in a negative way. I had to kind of pull back. And a disconnect began to really take root at that time. I was just occupied with other concerns. And then in February of 2017, I got myself tickets to go to Contact in the Desert. Yes, I did. That was to occur that May. At the beginning of April, my daughter was hospitalized, so it was a most distressing time. In addition, by then, my little elder doggie was so sick that I was giving him intravenous meds at home. My daughter came home and needed to live with Tom and I because she wasn't able to be on her own. Then the first week in May, Franklin the Noble Shih Tzu passed away. I was heartbroken. My friends, the couple, were sympathetic, of course. It was when the first Dark Journalist video with Bill Ryan came out that the female half of the couple began texting me urgent sounding messages. Their content was about the evils of Corey Goode, and they were really long messages. And I'll admit that I found these disturbing because there was such vitriol and little or no expressed concern about my well-being given my home life situation. It was a serious home life situation. So I ended up looking forward greatly to getting away for Contact in the Desert. It was a 3.5-hour drive from my house, and I went. I loved it. I was completely unaware of what was being said about dark energies harvesting people at conferences like these. I never felt anything malignant. Grief-stricken as I was, the people there were very warm and friendly in a very genuine, sincere, open-hearted way. And all in all, I had a great time. I heard Robert Schoch and Graham Hancock speak, and it was downright inspirational. On the last day, I heard Corey Goode speak. He said nothing memorable that I can recall, but I do remember the warmth of the people there in the hall when he was speaking. They were great. I see now that I had the wrong understanding about what the so-called truth community was. I'll admit it, I was idealistic. I saw the consciousness community coming together with what I called the UFO people, thinking that the tearing down of the conspiracy veil was bringing science and metaphysics together. That's how I saw it. So, at the end of Corey Goode's talk, I stood in line with a bunch of folks to have my picture taken with them. Honestly, the reason I got it was more about knowing how entertaining Tom would find it than anything else. I got home, posted it on Facebook, and just kind of forgot about it. The week I got home, I was deeply disturbed by the comments people were leaving on the Dark Journalist videos with Bill Ryan. As I saw this just coming home from Contact in the Desert, it struck me that there was some kind of an agency attack. I went deeply conspiratorial because this community had divided in two from my perspective. They were at each other's throats. Divide and conquer was in full swing, and it was ugly. Then the couple asked me how my trip was, and they said they wanted to Skype with me the following day. So we did. And they were very nice and fun. And they asked what my impression of Corey Goode was. So this was a video chat, and he wanted to know how my trip to Contact in the Desert was. I told him I had a blast and I hadn't sensed any weird energies, and he asked what my impression was of Corey Goode. I said basically he seemed like a nice guy, so we hung up. The very next day, I received a 3-sentence Skype text message from her. It said something to the effect of, "Thanks, it's been wonderful knowing you and you have helped us greatly. It's time to move on. We wish you all the best." I was in shock. He did monthly messages, and one came out the next day. In it, he said to his followers that Corey Goode and company were part of a satanic energy. Anyone who even thought good of him was satanic. I don't think I need to tell you how blown away I was. I was also reeling inside because I was experiencing all those challenging feelings one feels when you perceive you have been betrayed, right? So keeping in mind that I wasn't a member of the Corey Goode cult, quote unquote, I was in a very deep state of hurt. I became completely convinced that something or someone of a very dark nature was operating. I ventured into the YouTube comment section of Dark Journalist channel. I saw hate and ridicule being flung around by both sides. I ventured forth into commenting, and I asked for people to calm down. I'm doing this from memory. I don't even want to go look at that page anymore, but that's pretty much what I was doing. I was sticking up for Corey. I asked people to take a look at Corey's message first before coming to conclusions. So, of course, obviously, I set myself up, and I was verbally attacked. But there were some people who attacked with this incredibly low level of mean-mindedness with the intention of being hurtful, or maybe they were unconscious, not realizing, but I mean, my feelings got hurt. Par for the course back then, right? However, there was one comment that really wasn't mean at all, and it came from DJ himself. He asked me how neutral I really was. I guess I had said I'm neutral. And then he asked how neutral I really was if there was a picture of Corey and I with our arms around each other. And that stayed with me while I moved through my perceived sense of betrayal and hurt through the following days and weeks and months. I wrote about it on my blog. I didn't mention names, but those who knew understood what had happened. That's when I discovered C.W. Chanter's work, and in one video he expressed the dissatisfaction I was feeling with what I felt were DJ's and Bill Ryan's jump to judgments. I actually wrote a comment on C.W.'s channel. I felt such confusion. My daughter's illness escalated over the ensuing months, and I just naturally stopped watching videos and writing about conspiracies and secret space missions. Oh, I was listening to stuff, but I naturally pulled back. I started learning how to do bead weaving, and I threw myself into my photography. I pretty much steered clear of social media in the deep, deep conspiracy land. And, it was really healing and very grounding for me. Then, in August of last year, 2018, I started watching Dark Journalist again, the X series. I reconnected with my favorites, Richard Dolan, Joseph Farrell, and I couldn't get over the chutzpah in Corey Goode's wanting to trademark SSP. But what put me over the edge was Jordan Sather's outright doxing of Joe from the Carolinas, who I also love, by the way. I'd come around, I was able to see it. Sometimes these things just take a little bit of time. And that's pretty much the nutshell of the timeline. One last thing. The phrase blue chickens, blue chicken cult, I don't blame anyone other than Corey Goode himself for creating that term by his behavior, his lack of regard for common decency, his lack of integrity. And I do have a sense of humor about it. However, it does bring up the question of how people are made to feel with name-calling, derogatory terms. The way I see it, we are really seriously running out of time to get our act together, to grow up, to take responsibility for being full human beings. So I just ask that we all really do our best to be kind to one another, to respect one another, to hear the other person, and instead of putting negativity out there, I know it sounds trite, but this is for real. It's a feedback loop. Put positivity in it and get more back. And the more we put out, the more it comes back to the whole. And on that note, thank you for listening.